Hey everyone, Dr. Frunke here with an awesome new knife consult for you on the Protech Knives and Prometheus Design Works Invictus. This is a knife, if you will recall, that had some precursors, some predecessors that were produced by Protech under the PDW or Prometheus Design Works brand. The Invictus and the Invictus Auto were knives that were very, very popular and sold out very quickly. They had some minor variations. They were a bit more expensive than this one. This knife is the full production model. Protech has finally gotten the rights to produce this knife in production, and they are very excited about it. And I saw this one on some of the websites out there, and I was really tempted to buy one, and then I reached out to Protech to talk to them about it and the Malibu. So I got this direct from Protech. So thank you guys for sending this one along. I did pay for it with my own money, so it is my knife, and I have been carrying it. And so I wanted to talk about it, and this is going to be a very positive review. I really, really enjoy this knife. I think it is really great for EDC, and it really challenges the idea that automatic knives are not fun or not practical or not EDC friendly. I think that there's a bad misconception out there about automatic knives in general, and I think this one really, for me, breaks through the sort of the barrier towards owning one of these knives, and I'll explain why. So first of all, let's get some vital signs on this knife. The Invictus is a very nicely sized knife. It is a full-size knife. You're going to see up front we have a 3.5-inch blade. You're at 4 inches to the pivot and about 8.25, 8.3 inches of overall length. Let me bring out another couple of knives for a size comparison. You're going to notice it is basically the same size profile as a Spyderco Paramilitary 2. There you see the new Sprint Run version in Aramis Akhmedov scales made out of carbon plate, carbon fiber. Cool stuff. But take a look here. The Para 3 down below is much, much smaller. So this is a full-size knife, that 3.5-inch blade. But you're also going to notice, much like the Spyderco Paramilitary 2, that has a very large handle relative to a small blade and a relatively small cutting length. I said the blade itself was 3.5 inches. The cutting length is really coming in at about 3.1 inches to include that forward choil. So it's a lot of handle for not very much cutting length. And some people don't like that, but I think that it functions very well as a tool. A lot like the Paramilitary 2, there are a lot of ergonomic options in terms of holding the knife and actually using it as a tool when you don't need a very long cutting edge, just an effective cutting edge. And so that's sort of the premise of the PM2, and it carries over to this knife as well. So let's go ahead and break this knife down anatomically. Up front is that blade done in 154 cm. Not CPM 154, but 154 cm. Protech does this on their lower end knives. They've started getting into 20 CV lately. If you go back and watch my Malibu video, they use 20 CV on that knife. The blade tucks away very nicely into the handle. It's very sleek when it's closed. The 154 cm steel is a bit of an older type of steel. It is the ingot style steel. It is not powdered metallurgy like CPM 154, which is the sort of the next level of that knife, of that blade steel. 154 cm became CPM 154. The reason that it's not a huge issue on this knife is that 154 cm has a very nice grain structure already. It's got great corrosion resistance, and it takes on some very favorable properties for an EDC style blade. It's relatively tough, it's corrosion resistance, and it takes a nice edge and it holds it, and it's relatively easy to sharpen. So this has real use in mind. Some people may be disappointed by that knife steel, by that blade steel, but I am told that there will be multiple variants of this knife moving forward. There may even be special editions with different steels, but I'm not complaining about that steel. To be perfectly honest, with a good heat treat, most of these steels will be perfectly adequate for everyone's needs. It has done very well with cardboard and paper for me without any signs of wear at all. So the blade design itself is actually what really draws me to this knife. It's a very nice spear point design. You can see how it tapers there at the top. There's a very nice swedge The way that it transitions into the primary bevel is very unique and very cool. Obviously, there's a large fuller. Some people call this a blood groove right here in the middle. These are meant to reduce some of the weight of the blade. It really acts as a nice visual point as well. It's really nice looking. It really augments the lines of the knife and it gives it some depth. The Prometheus Design Works logo is pretty neat on the front. It's very subtle. It's just a design. Protech has their standard branding on the back. Protech USA, made in USA. It's a bit redundant if you ask me. On the Malibu, if you saw that, they're moving towards a more sleek branding and labeling type of scenario. There's some serialization here on the inside. PR3 number 514 going on with this knife, but there's no steel designation written obvious in an obvious place for us to see. But again, 154 cm. So the blade is flat ground and it is very effective. It's not going to be the sliciest knife in the collection. It's not going to be a performer quite like the Paramilitary 2, but this knife is meant actually as almost as a self-defense knife. This is originally designed for military and police officers and law enforcement officers as a tactical blade, and so that is the purpose of this. It also, crossing over with Prometheus Design Works sort of MO, is an outdoors and survival type of knife, a camping type of knife, so it crosses over for double duty. That is the intent of this knife. It is not really meant to be a fine cutting tool, a precision cutting tool. This is supposed to be sharp. It's supposed to work in many situations. It's supposed to be robust and able to survive in a very difficult situation. The thick flats also augment this ability. The fuller also adds strength to the blade, if you understand the way that that goes about. So the edge came very sharp. Protech always sends their knives out very sharp. I enjoy that there's a forward finger choil. There's very effective jimping on top. It's not overly sharp. It grips the thumb very well. And you have precision control on the blade. It's easy to reach up and over with the ergonomics. It's a very slim, straight profile. This is a very nice in-the-hand experience. It's very stick-like. It's just very straight and easy to hold in multiple positions. A lot of knives get carried away with their ergonomic curvatures and choils and whatnot, and it makes it even more difficult to hold the knife. This one is quite easy in a number of positions. Moving back to the pivot, this is an interesting feature that I found by speaking to the folks at Protech. When they hard anodize the aluminum frame, this is hard anodized aluminum going on here, it creates alumina oxide on the surface, and technically that is a ceramic material. It's hard enough to be considered a ceramic, and so there are no washers, there are no bearings. The blade rides on the ceramic coated frame. The hard anodization process of aluminum produces a nice slick surface that the steel can ride on without wearing it down. And honestly, it's quite smooth. I mean, an automatic knife does not need to be as smooth as it's on bearings because it's not going to drop close, but it feels very progressive and smooth as it closes. And obviously, it fires out very, very quickly. I think that's an ingenious solution. I'm sure other knives have that going on, but it removes another piece that you'd have to otherwise worry about degrading or breaking down over time, or not being to your liking. I mean, there's no washers, there's no bearings, so there's nothing to maintain. That's very nice in its simplicity. It has a hex type hardware all throughout. Actually, that hardware is hidden on the back here. It has Torx screws for the pocket clip, which we'll talk about in just a minute. The back of the pivot is this nice satin finished circle. I really enjoy the action on this knife. So this knife, as you've seen, is automatic. There is this beautiful button with inlaid red G10. It just makes you want to push it. There is a safety button right here, a safety switch made out of aluminum. It feels very nice. There's a positive click and unclick. If I push this here, I'm unable to deploy the knife. If I release it, press the button, bam, fires out. And that action is so satisfying. Anyone who owns one of these knives or has held a Protech Auto knows that they have one of the best actions in the industry. It is assertive, it is fast, and it is strong. And one of the safety features about that strong action, say I were to disengage the lock here. The way you do that is you press the red button, it disengages the lock, and you can close it. Say I accidentally let go of the knife here, it's going to go back to the fully locked position. If I accidentally do this and my hand slips, it's going to allow it to keep going and lock back into place. It's not very difficult to retract the blade into the handle, and honestly, this challenges my conception, at least, that autos can't be fidget toys. I play with this knife all day, just firing it out and putting it back in place. It's as much fun as any of my frame lock flippers, and I challenge anyone to handle this knife for a couple of days and say otherwise. Moving back to the handles, as I mentioned before, it is hard anodized aluminum. This has the PDW sort of motif with these parallel lines running right here. It's a very clean look. I really enjoy the look of the closed handle. I love the way that the handle somewhat mirrors the shape of the blade. That spear point tip, sort of with this tapered tip in the tail right here. It's a very clean look. On the back, you have those same lines. It does not cause any snagging on the pocket because it's very smooth. The handle is done in a semi-integral type construction. I mentioned this in the Malibu video. Sometimes there is a micron of asymmetry going on with these things. If you stare at it long enough, they can look symmetrical, but sometimes the light plays tricks and it looks a little bit not perfectly aligned, but if you look really close, it actually is pretty aligned. This can bother some people's OCD. It doesn't bother me. It is precision milling on both of these scales and everything fits together very tightly. But for some folks that may be slightly annoying, it's something worth noting. One thing that is definitely not annoying is how awesome this pocket clip is. I mentioned it in the Malibu video. The guys at Protech countersink where the clip goes in. Let's see if we can get it to focus. And the screws go right into the frame there. And then there is nothing sticking up right here. That has always kind of been a little bit of a problem with standard Spyderco type clips or other clips. The screws always protrude into that space, narrowing that space unnecessarily, sometimes snagging certain types of cloth material on the pockets. This one, obviously, you're not going to have that issue. So sorry that it's blurry right there. I really like the spring of the clip. It's much like a Spyderco clip. There's a large lip on the front of it, and it works very well. I've managed to scrape it just a little bit from carrying it a little bit. I really enjoy this clip. It is really fantastic. The centering was nice right out of the box. It might need a little bit of a tuning right now, but again, if you look at it closely enough, it will be right on center. I might need to just tighten it a little bit. There is no play when the knife is locked up. The button lock mechanism is very solid. There's no motion on that blade at all. And I really enjoy it. So what is this knife like to carry on an everyday basis? It's very easy. The slim profile in the hand combined with the relatively low weight, it's a 3.5-inch blade coming in at 3.86 ounces. So anything under 4 ounces is relatively easy to carry every day. Very lightweight given due to the aluminum handles and construction. Like I mentioned earlier, excellent ergonomic options because of the straight, slim profile, and a very, very nice blade, a reliable blade, one that came very sharp in a steel that I know I'll be able to maintain over the long term of the knife. I have nothing to complain about on this knife. I kind of was hoping, I was thinking that like other autos, I was going to get kind of bored. I was going to think it wasn't so great after a few days, but I've had this for a few weeks now, and I absolutely adore it. I'm really thinking about holding on to this for a long time as a true EDC blade. It just is very reliable and very function forward and a whole lot of fun at the same time. Add to that, it is made right here in the United States of America. That's where I'm from. So that gives me a certain amount of pride. I really like American manufacturing. So certainly at times like this, countries are taking pride in their own manufacturing, especially the US. So definitely something to consider when looking at all of your options. Now, this knife is coming in around $280, $290 on some sites. depending on the spec. It's a little bit expensive, if you ask me, regarding the materials and the steel. However, the licensure with PDW undoubtedly adds that slight extra cost. It might otherwise be somewhere closer to $200, but the extra licensure probably adds the extra money. Again, there will be other options coming down the pipeline. I'm excited that they brought this model back. I need to check out the full blacked out DLC version. I really like the way that one looks as well. So tell me what you guys think of the PDW Invictus, the Protech PDW Invictus down below. Leave some comments, click like and subscribe. Check me out on Instagram as Dr. Frunky. Go follow Protech at Protech Knives on Instagram. And as always, guys, this is Dr. Frunky saying take care.